The name of the song, Buffalo Gals. That's a classic hip-hop joint, classic b-boy record, coming from who is now the late Malcolm Mclaren. People give him a lot of credit for being one of those innovative individuals who was a bridge between the underground communities that surrounded new wave / punk and hip-hop. And we wanted to talk a little bit about that this afternoon because I think that when we talk about hip-hop, that's an unwritten, uncelebrated story. And one of the people who I feel was primary force in that and knew Malcolm Mclaren is Fab Five Freddy. Freddy, how you doing, fan?
What up, Davey D? Longtime fan of yours, as you know. And yeah, man. Back in the early 80s, I remember when Malcolm Mclaren came on the downtown scene.
Definitely. You know, a couple of things before we even get into that. How do you feel about just your role? I mean, when I think of Fab Five Freddy, I think, you know, everybody, your name got immortalized. One of the first people in hip-hop to have his name immortalized in a shout-out by Blondie and her record.
Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. DJ spinning, I said, my, flash is fast, flash is cool, front swass and far, flush ain't no do, and you don't stop, sure shot, go out to the parking lot, and you get in your car and drive real far, and you drive all night, and then you see a light, and
yeah, Chris Stein and Deborah Harry from Blondie were really, they were like patrons of mine, if you will. If you don't know what a patron is, like in the art world, you have people that support artists by their work, take them under the wing, and help show them around a little bit. And that's what happened with them. You know, as a kid coming up in Bed-Stuy, having ideas about how to take my graffiti art from the trains and get into galleries like people like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein, stuff that I had just seen, you know, hanging out in, you know, in libraries, going to museums. I used to cut school, not something I recommend, but I would go to museums around Manhattan, got familiar with the idea of art. When I caught wind of what was going on in the punk world in the late 70s, I had a sense that these people would understand that there's a similar energy in this, in what was hip-hop at the time, which was really raw, still pretty much in the streets going on in the Bronx and up in Manhattan. So I eventually met some of these people on that punk scene, and they immediately agreed with my ideas that there was a kind of a similar sensibility and punk rock energy and what was going on in hip-hop, just a rebellious attitude behind it all. Not so much a musical connection, but it was an attitude kind of connection that I saw.
Right.
And so that was the foundation of our friendship. Myself, another young brother, he's also resting in peace, resting in power, brother by the name of Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's a young aspiring painter from Brooklyn like me, trying to do similar things. So we became partners in crime, so to speak, art crime, if you will. And we met and hung out on the downtown scene, lower Manhattan, late 70s going into the early 80s, and found a lot of love in the small pockets of people that were the players on the punk and new wave scene. So that was the beginning of all that for me, and that ends up with Blondie, Deborah Harry, Chris Stein, her man. That was the core of the group, making a song called Rapture, based on ideas I talked to them about, like, yeah, Flash is fast, and there's fly girls and fly guys, and they made this rap and gave me a shout out.
With that being said, let's talk a little bit about Malcolm Mclaren, because for a lot of people outside of New York, we knew of Malcolm Mclaren on the West Coast because of his connection with the dead Sex Pistols, and then, you know, later they broke up. But when he put out a record, there were people out here that was like, is that the guy? Is that the same guy? And that's how, and that was a huge record. And I don't think people who weren't around at the time don't realize the impact that it had. But because you were in both worlds, how did you see that, and how is Malcolm Mclaren? Why do we give him his props?
Okay, well, let me first give you the story, because when Malcolm passed, I think it was last week, a couple of people hit me up on my Twitter and said, I bet Fab's got some good Malcolm McLaren stories. But, 140 characters on Twitter is not always enough to really expound on the situation. But here's the deal. I also used to do a little rapping here and there. For those DJs that got their crates in effect, I did a record called Change the Beat,
yes.
Which was a French-English rap record where I rapped in French. No, I don't speak French, but I learned French to do this one little song. Then I flowed in English. The end of that record is a little part that all you DJs have cut up 2 million times plus. This stuff is really fresh, which is my voice run through a vocoder. And
you were the first auto-tune guy.
It wasn't auto-tune then, it was a vocoder. It was like a vocoder type of situation, and Bill Laswell, who was the producer, who was a kind of new way, he just ran the sound through some compressors and whatever at the studio and made that weird sound on my voice.
Les femmes coachent cool rap bread, et juste cool dans le mood, tout le mécanisme. Je passe tous les mots de New York City. But turn it to the square, c'est ton période de quoi. J'ai le téléphone coupé, I'm on the way on the top. I cruise around dans les blues, petit dans les bars. Ma casse sont de clous, les boulots ça fait round. Je passe mon temps à café, jouer des vidéos. Je fais de rap and rave, quand je sway my low, to the beat. To the beat, Comme la vitesse de Bridget 117 je quand il y a belle musique avec la belle poupée. Un pouvoir léger doux et nous faut pas jamais. Je ne vous peux pas ma trappe à travailler sans play. Avant qu'elle ouvre la bouche, je lui dis mon prix. Du sang de la même les frais sont pas compris. Sous les billets verts et des bourses sans affaires. Les fêtes, bien te croire, c'est tout ça les soirs. To the beat.
We're back here talking with Fat by Freddy, and before we went to the break, I had deemed you the first MC to be on a vocoder. You said actually the first auto-tune guy, but you said it's a vocoder.
It was sort of a vocoder. Bill Laswell, a producer that worked with Celluloid Records, the label that put my record out, he was really like a technical genius. So he ran my voice through whatever it was to make the sound. It wasn't quite a vocoder, but auto-tune was not invented yet. And so that is the stuff is really fresh sound that it's the sound most synonymous with the idea of scratching, because it is what most people use to give you that scratch sound. So basically the reason I was telling you about my record is I used to do a little rapping on the downtown scene. After that record, Change the Beat, blew up and was a big part of the downtown New York scene at the time, I had went out on the road with the Rock City crew, the premier group of New York City b-boys / breakdancers, and we had just come back from doing about 3 or 4 cities, and we were performing at a club in New York at the time called the Peppermint Lounge. Mm-hmm. And a woman named Blue, known as Kool Lady Blue, who was an English girl, white English girl that was that had started, the Roxy after a club called The Grill, which is where uptown hip-hop culture met downtown new wave punk rock culture. And so she knew all the players from the scene in England. So at this gig that I was performing at with the Rocksteady crew, breakdancing and spinning all over the place, heads and what have you, she brought Malcolm Mclaren. And I was like, now I knew all about Malcolm because I knew the whole punk rock history, but I had also become good friends with Johnny Lydon, who was formerly Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. He was now doing a group called PIL, Public Image Limited. And I had hung out with Johnny Lydon, and he told me how Malcolm had ripped those guys off. He was the genius that helped to promote and market punk, but he got the lion's share of the money. And as a guy that wasn't really trying to be a rapper, and I was a struggling artist, I didn't really want to deal with him. So when after the gig at the Peppermint Lounge, Blue was like, I have Malcolm Mclaren here, and I was like, whoa, you sure do. And we were nice, we were cordial. He wanted to connect with somebody that could take him uptown to the Bronx and Harlem to really see it, and I wasn't going to be that guy. So that was the I'm a fan of yours, as you know, and yeah, man. Back in the early 80s, I remember when Malcolm Mclaren came on the downtown scene.
Definitely. You know, a couple of things before we even get into that. How do you feel about just your role? I mean, when I think of Fab Five Freddy, I think, you know, everybody, your name got immortalized. One of the first people in hip-hop to have it. His name immortalized in a shout out by Blondie and her record.
Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody slide. DJ spinning, I said in my mind. Flash is fast, flash is cool. Francois c'est pas, flash ain't no duke. And you don't stop, sure shot. Go out to the
Founded new wave / punk and hip hop. And we wanted to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Because I think that when we talk about hip-hop, that's an unwritten, uncelebrated story. And one of the people who I feel was primary force in that and knew Malcolm Mclaren is Fab Five Freddy. Freddy, how you doing, fan?
What up, Davey D? Long time.
The name of the song, Buffalo Gals. That's a classic hip-hop joint, classic b-boy record, coming from who is now the late Malcolm Mclaren. People give him a lot of credit for being one of those innovative individuals who was a bridge between the underground communities that surround